All right, let's bring in Senator Lindsey Graham, Air Force veteran, and he's made many trips to Afghanistan, countless. So is this what victory looks like?
Yeah, it is for the Taliban. They're celebrating. So here's the scary thing, guys. I think President Biden really believes this was successful. Joe Biden's a dangerous man when it comes to our national security and our economic well-being, and you really can't believe a word he's telling you. Let's just look at what he's telling us about our own national security. The war is over. Well, if the war is over, why we're still using drones to kill terrorists in Afghanistan? I can assure you the war between radical Islam and the United States and Afghanistan is not over. But here's what's so misleading about the Biden administration. They're trying to convince us that we can be protected from another 9/11 by using drones in Afghanistan. Well, let me just remind you about Iraq and Syria. Joe Biden pushed really hard to remove all of our troops from Iraq. He was told if you do that, ISIS could surge. Well, what happened? When we left our troops, guys, we started using drones. That did not stop the caliphate from forming. The drone program will not stop ISIS from growing in Afghanistan. It did not work in Iraq and Syria. We're very much exposed to a 9/11. And again, this is the same president who told you there was no al-Qaeda presence in Afghanistan about a week ago. He's the same guy that said all of our allies are cheering us on. He's the same guy that said the Taliban are waving Americans through. You can't believe anything he says, but I think in his mind, he believes he's been successful, and that scares the hell out of me.
To your point, you can't believe what he says. Senator Graham, the Wall Street Journal today writes, the president and his advisors have decided that the only way out of this debacle is to lie about it, blame everybody else, and claim that defeat is really a victory. Neither one is reassuring about Mr. Biden's character, his judgment, or more ominously, the long 3.5 years left in his presidency.
Well, that's true. They're trying to turn the page, and they're lying about the state of play in Afghanistan. Here's the state of play. The Taliban are in control, but it won't last that long. I'll make a prediction on our show. I think a year from now, the whole country is going to disintegrate into a real civil war. You've got Afghan resistance fighters in Panjshir Valley. Have you heard the president or anybody on his team mention for one moment, let's go help those guys who fought along our side?
They just repelled the Taliban.
Allow women to live?
They just repelled the Taliban.
They repelled the Taliban, but Biden is negotiating with the Taliban. He's putting all his eggs in the Taliban basket. Well, the Taliban and al-Qaeda are one. That's how we got attacked on 9/11 20 years ago. ISIS considers the Taliban the Rotary Club, and you've got the resistance in Panjshir that's being completely ignored. The Taliban are destroying all the cell towers in Panjshir Valley, so the resistance can't communicate with the world. So I would urge the Biden administration to send satellite phones, start helping the resistance. And if they try to give one dime of aid to the Taliban, I will fight that as hard as I can in the United States Senate, because if you start paying terrorists like the Taliban to get Americans out of Afghanistan or get our allies out of Afghanistan who fought along our side, you're putting Americans at risk all over the world, because it will be open season on Americans throughout the world by terrorist organizations.
Senator, we've heard so many stories of our people, our allies, or Americans that are trapped over there and still trapped. There's one that was brought to our attention this morning. There is an interpreter there. He's going by the name Mohammed, and he tried to make it to the airport. They told him, you can get on, but your wife and your 4 children can't, so of course he didn't leave them. He actually helped Joe Biden 13 years ago in 2008 when he was a senator, and John Kerry was on this helicopter, and so was Chuck Hagel. They had to land their helicopter in the middle of a snowstorm, and this interpreter is sent in, and he helped so many Americans. Pete Hegseth told us earlier on the show. And he rescued the senators, and he's still there. And his message to Joe Biden is, hello, Mr. President, save me and my family. Don't forget me here. How are we going to get these folks out that need to be rescued?
I think we're going to try to bribe them out. I think we're putting on the table, the Biden administration, is economic aid to the Taliban. If you'll release the hostages, the Americans, and the allies who fought along our side, we will give you money. That is a dangerous way to do business when it comes to terrorism. And if they start doing that, ISIS is going to turn on Taliban even more ferociously. Do you remember the movie Sophie's Choice?
Yeah.
Where you had a concentration camp victim had a daughter and a son, and the German said, "Which one do you want me to take?"
Right.
Hundreds of people came to these checkpoints, and they had to pick between them and their families. Joe Biden, if there was a contest to screw up Afghanistan and make America less safe, the plan by Joe Biden would have won the contest. I cannot tell you how dangerous life is going to be for those inside of Afghanistan who helped us, and I cannot stress enough how much we're exposed 20 years after 9/11 to another attack originating in Afghanistan,
Right.
because the strategy we have in place will not work.
So the over the horizon doesn't exist because it comes from the Middle East. Because we can't get any of the stands to allow us to base. It's
Did
gonna
it
take
work
too
in
long.
Iraq and Syria?
It didn't, and it takes
Did it
too long
work
to
in
get
Iraq
there.
and Syria?
No, it didn't, and that's what brings me
Right.
to my other point. He said we shouldn't go for the threats of 2000 in 2021. We shouldn't be going by the threats of 2001. He says we face threats from al-Shabaab in Somalia, al-Qaeda affiliates in Syria and the Arabian Peninsula, and ISIS attempting to create a caliphate in Syria. Okay, al-Shabaab, we have
Right.
people in that region. Al-Qaeda affiliates in Syria, and we were there. He doesn't know we're in Syria. But guess who is in Afghanistan? The number 2 guy to bin Laden after Zawahiri is now in Kabul. The Haqqani network affiliated with al-Qaeda, the closest and the most lethal, they are providing the security. And the Taliban have people with them that hate them that are even worse than the Taliban. You don't have to travel out of Afghanistan to meet our enemies, Senator. What does he not get?
Well, I think he's delusional about the situation on the ground. A week ago, he said there's no al-Qaeda presence in Afghanistan. Well, I about fell over when I heard that. The number 2 guy in the Taliban organization is an Haqqani member with a $10 million bounty on his on his head, offered by the U.S. government. It's illegal under our law to negotiate with foreign terrorist organizations. I think the Taliban are a foreign terrorist organization because the number 2 guy has a $10 million bounty on his head. Real quickly, let's look at Syria and Iraq. We have American soldiers inside of Syria working with the Kurds to keep the keep ISIS from coming back. We have 5,000 people almost inside of Iraq to make sure ISIS doesn't come back. We have special forces on the ground in Africa to deal with al-Shabaab. What's the one theater where terrorists are there by the thousands? We have no troops. Afghanistan. Where's the one place that we got attacked from 20 years ago? Afghanistan. Joe Biden has learned nothing in the last 20 years. This is the biggest mistake since 9/11. He's put our nation at risk. Who's going to fight along our side after we abandon all these allies in Afghanistan? And the likelihood of another 9/11 originating from Afghanistan is 10 times greater than it is from Iraq, Syria, or Africa.
And nobody's been fired. They all have their jobs, so we're in for this chaos for 3.5 more years.
20 years after 9/11, the Taliban is back in control.
And they got a casket of us with a flag draped over it. That's how reformed they are.
You haven't heard of any threats, have you?
Oh my God, I can't. Well, let's look at it this way, guys. How smart do you have to be to figure out that if al-Qaeda and ISIS are roaming freely inside of Afghanistan and the only thing protecting us is the Taliban doesn't have the will or the capability to protect American interests. We're blind and we're naked. Yes, I've heard of threats. It's just going to be a matter of months, not years, before the threats materialize. The training camps will be open pretty soon for al-Qaeda, and ISIS is flourishing. The number of ISIS fighters doubled when they had the jailbreak. This is a witch's brew of evil in Afghanistan. The vacuum created by this stupid withdrawal has put us at risk. Thousands of people who fought along our side are going to get killed. They just shot a guy for being a folk singer. Do you think the Taliban is really any different? I promise you this, if we try to legitimize the Taliban, I will declare war on the Biden administration in the U.S. Senate.
You got to get the majority.
And we have an open border.
All right, Senator
thank
Lindsey
you.
Graham,
Well,
thank
hopefully
you.
get some Democrats that are not completely blind to what's going on.
Well,
Thank
let's
you.
see. All right, sir, thank you very much.
Thanks.